what should be happening right now, and what would the penalty be?
What should be happening right now? What do you mean by that?
Like, I'm not saying if there isn't, like, what is the normal process by which the arrest happens? Like, what should be playing out in the courts? How would this normally be handled? If it wasn't a high profile case, if it was just like two kids in Chicago, what would be happening right now? Like, they're going to go to pretrial hearings? Like,
yeah. So that's what'll happen. So now he's been bailed out. There'll be months and months and months of pretrial hearings. There'll be in limiting motions to exclude certain kinds of evidence. There'll be motions to bring in certain kind of expert witnesses. Ideally, by the time the trial actually starts, by the time a jury is seated, everybody should know, the lawyers should know exactly what legal arguments and what evidence is going to be presented. There should be no surprises for them. It's all supposed to be basically scripted out ahead of time. The only thing that's happening in the courtroom really is it's kind of a theatrical presentation to the jury. Yeah. They're the ones seeing it all for the first time. So they call it preliminary hearings, like preliminary sounds unimportant. This is where the legal battlefield for that trial is being defined. Like it's like a football field being painted out. This is where the rules are, what you're allowed to argue, what witnesses you're allowed to have. This actually largely determines the outcome of the trial, all these preliminary hearings.
So based on, we'll clarify your guys' view in a second, but like based on how you guys view what went down, what do you think the penalty for Karmelo Anthony should be?
You know, I have to be honest, I don't really do sentencing stuff.
Then what would your assumption be on what a court would prescribe for this crime?
Typically, it would be 20 to life.
20 to life?
Yeah.
Wow.
Often without possibility of early release.
So, wow.
Yep.
But what does that really turn into? Does it always actually...
If it's life without possibility of early release, you're in there forever.
But 20 to life, right?
So it varies a lot by states because different states have different rules about how much they can reduce it before you're eligible for parole. Some it's a third. You only do a third and you're eligible.
Yeah.
So a 20-year sentence could be 7 years and then you're out.
What do you think? You're the cop.
25 to life, eligible for parole. Right now, if they determine later on that it was like he went up to a group of friends and said, I'm going to go over there and start some shit.
Life.
Probably.
Premeditation.
I mean, it's Texas, so they're a little more heavy-handed than New York, who has a catch and release program. Ask me how I know. And
we're not fans.
Yeah. Thanks, Governor Kathy Hochul. And so if this is, this is Texas. In New York, I would say probably
he'd be let out right away, and they'd apologize to him.
Pretty much, they'd give him an iPad and a cell, and
here's a new knife.
Yeah, here's a new shiv, and then they let him stab a corrections officer. Yeah, I'd say like 20 to life, maybe 20 to 40 years. He'd probably get parole in about 15, and he'd be on the streets on parole for 15, 20 years until probably 45. He'd be clean. Absolutely nothing by 45.
How do you guys view this? Like the story, what happened?
What do you mean?
Like, how would you describe what happened based on what we know? Just like, and why it warrants 20 to 40 or 20 to life? Like, what happened? Like, what do you think happened?
Two high school students got into a momentary beef with each other. One grabbed the other one, and the other one stabbed him in the heart. I don't think it's really much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
We've all been to high school, right? We've all gotten into fights in high school. Well, except none of us got stabbed in the heart. But
high school had guns.
It's the most common thing in the world.
Yeah. Well then, I guess it seems clear cut.
Except the stabbing part. That's
what. I mean, my only, and this kind of shifts the direction a little bit, but I think when we look at the campaign and the amount of money that it's raised, what we've seen with campaigns like this is that they are driven by media sensationalism. And so I wouldn't have expected this campaign in that fact base level thing to raise nearly this type of money. It's because of the outrage on the other side, particularly on the right, that I think is fueling this. I think these donations is being fueled by people that are saying, look at what they're saying, what the right is saying in these scenarios where they allowed campaigns for Derek Chauvin and all these other people. It was the same thing that drove Daniel Penny's, the amount of money Daniel Penny raised, 3 point whatever million, was because the mainstream media immediately created a black and white narrative and ran with it. And then these things are fueled by the media narratives around it.
Yeah, I mean, no one's donating because they're calculating what they think the legal defense is going to cost, and they want to make sure he has that much money, right? Each individual's donating largely on an emotion-driven basis.
Yeah, I've read the comments. Some of them are disgusting.
So we have a question from Chad Smith. He says, Texas recognizes imperfect self-defense. Impact?
Well, unfortunately for Anthony, the version of imperfect self-defense that Texas recognizes is different than the rest of the country. The rest of the country, and what imperfect self-defense does is if you're convicted of murder, it mitigates the murder down to manslaughter. So instead of looking at life, you're looking at 20, maybe you get out in 7-8 years. You started as a 17-year-old kid, you're out in your mid-20s, you still have a life to live. Manslaughter sucks, but it's a lot better than a murder conviction. And in most states, how imperfect self-defense works is you had a genuine fear of deadly force harm from somebody and you killed them in self-defense, but your fear was objectively unreasonable. It was kind of a panic reaction, for example. That can't qualify as perfect self-defense and get you an acquittal because perfect self-defense has to be reasonable, but it can mitigate murder down to manslaughter.
So let's say there's like an old white guy and he's like seriously like 75.
I think we just had a case like this where an old white guy, a young black gentleman came up to his door.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yep.
He got into a car accident and he jogged up to the door to ask for help and he was injured and the old man feared this, panicked, think he was going to be robbed or whatever and shot the guy.
Yep.
Through the door, wasn't it?
I think it was through the door.
Well, in the case I'm thinking of, the young black man thought he was at someone's house to pick up his brother.
Oh, that was a different one.
Right.
That one.
That guy shot through the door.
Yeah, but that kid, like, the report for that is that he knocked on the door.
Yeah.
I kind of think he probably opened the door, thinking like
he definitely had his hand. He had his hand on the handle. Yeah.
So how would that? So let's do that story because the one where the guy runs into the house that was really sad. He got into a car accident.
Yeah.
He was injured and he was jogging up to the house to get help because he needed to call somebody and they panicked and shot him or something like that. In that story that you mentioned where he went to the wrong house, how did that one play out?
The old man took a plea, and then before he could be sentenced on the plea, he died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Justice. Cold bitch.
Oh, my gosh.
He just died of old age. But that would be a classic case where the jury could believe, all right, this old guy, he legitimately had a fear of death from this young black man trying to get into his house, apparently. But that fear was objectively unreasonable. He should not, a hypothetical reasonable and prudent person would not have had that fear.
Do y'all have any fears that with the selective release of information, the right could be being misled on what happened with the Karmelo Anthony case?
Everybody's misled in all these cases. It's disinformation all day, especially from the media. Everything the media says about any of these high-profile cases has to be presumed to be misinformation, to be false, to be lies, until proven otherwise. Right. The only thing that counts is the actual evidence, not how it's recounted or how someone describes it, the actual evidence.
So my concern is the adamant nature on the right that this is as we believe it to be. My fear is you've got 33 witnesses who've not given statements or have, and we don't know what those statements are.
Sure.
Yep.
What if 15 of those tell a completely different story and say that Karmelo tried fleeing and, Austin won, or something like that? I really doubt that's the case, considering the two witnesses that are presented in this. But I do have a concern that the right is assuming that I believe there's two witnesses that gave versions of the events that are available in this police report out of 35.
Right. Listen, there is evidence that could develop that could make this self-defense, or at least look a lot more like self-defense. So if Austin Metcalf greatly outweighed Karmelo Anthony, which could be the case, right? They're reporting.
So
I'm suspicious of that weight number for Karmelo Anthony because I think it was from an outdated ID, and teenagers grow a lot, over a short period of time. But say there was a real disparity of size and strength, and Austin Metcalf grabbed him and then said, "I'm going to beat you to death." Well, that's a different scenario then. Then there may be a reasonably perceived imminent threat of deadly force harm, because deadly force harm doesn't just mean force that can kill you. It means force that can cause you serious bodily injury, a maiming type of injury, or broken bone. That would justify the use of deadly defensive force. The trouble is we don't have any evidence like that yet. And Karmelo Anthony himself, he says things to the police, and he does not say anything like that. He doesn't say he was in fear for his life. He doesn't recite any facts that would reasonably be perceived as a deadly force threat from Austin Metcalf.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.